And welcome back once again to the Lightweight Pregamers, a fantasy football podcast for the Pregame HQ. I am your host, CJ Kraus. Tonight we are talking the big trade that went down with Indianapolis Colts and the Philadelphia Eagles for Carson Wentz. Also great on the agenda, we have bounce back players for the 2021 NFL season for fantasy football. But I cannot do this alone. As always, bringing the crew from Pregame HQ in here. We got Avram back in here, and we got Tony heading it up again. How we doing, boys?
I'm good, man. I got my big beer. It's Friday. We got some trades to talk about. We got some comeback players, bounce back players, to talk about. I'm feeling good. How about you, Avram?
Can't complain, man. It seems like every single time we meet up, we're talking a big quarterback trade. That's the way the stars align. So by that logic, next time we get together, is it going to be Deshaun watch being finalized? I don't know. I hope so. But this time it's Wentz. Last time it was Stafford. Keep it coming.
Yeah, we keep dropping on these ones. We keep catching all these big trades, which is a lot of fun to talk about, speculating. So it's really cool that I get to hang out with you guys again going on this one. So we already talked about it, bringing it up. We have the big trade going down. Carson Wentz being traded from the Philadelphia Eagles to the Indianapolis Colts for a 21 third, a conditional 22 second that can become a 22 first if he plays 75% of snaps in the next season. But I think that's kind of banking on his injury risk in there as well. But who do you think the big winner of the trade is here, Tony?
The bigger winner, I'd say, is the Colts. They got their quarterback position figured out, at least for this year. I heard that they wanted to get a bunch more picks. The Eagles wanted to get more picks or more valuable picks out of it, but I think it just got to a point where they needed to get a deal done. And the Colts, I think, doing it before the draft, even before free agency, can help them line up themselves to go into free agency and then the draft. I think the bigger winner is the Colts, like I said, because they figured out the quarterback scenario and they don't have to go sign or draft anyone if they don't want to. But I still think the Eagles, they're cleaning up that mess from this past season. They're getting value where they can. I don't know if they're going to start cutting people to start opening up some cap space, but I would say the Colts are their bigger winner here. I mean, it just depends on how you feel on Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz is just going to do well in Indianapolis, but I would say the Colts are probably the bigger winner. It's not like huge. It's not like they're a big gap, but for me, they edge it out a little bit.
Yeah, an interesting part of that is that the cap thing you brought up right there, because they are eating about $34 million in cap just by trading him away. So they're just like paying him to go, which we saw. We've seen this happen a few times with quarterbacks. Most notably, I believe it was Houston who they traded. I can't remember his name.
Osweiler, right? Yeah,
Osweiler. That's who it was. Yeah, Brock Osweiler.
Rocket ship.
Yeah. With that one, Avram, who do you think the winner of this deal is?
Yeah, man. So I think the biggest winner is Carson Wentz himself, just kind of going to a team where you've got a rock solid offensive line. And yes, Costanza did retire, but the fact that the Colts retained that first round pick this year, that is huge in my opinion, because now that's in a great position to get one of those, offensive linemen, whether it's someone like a Darisaw or if someone else slips. So that's exciting to me, reunited with Reich where there's history there. And I think, the Colts are just a more complete team than the Philadelphia Eagles right now. And at the end of the day, obviously all these rumors come out, I swear Carson Wentz was a Chicago Bear almost like 10 times.
Yeah.
And the deal that was there was, a first round pick, Nick Foles and Tariq Cohen. That's the latest one that I kind of remember. And I think that would have been a steeper price to pay for Carson Wentz than what the Colts gave up. It's a third round pick. And then the second round pick, ultimately, I do think that probably goes to a first round pick, but the way they did it conditional wise, it's good insurance for them. So it's not that big of a loss. You tell me a second and third round pick for Carson Wentz, someone that has big upside. It's not a bad deal in my opinion. So I like it for them. You have your first round pick. You can go ahead, get that offensive lineman, and then in free agency, if you get a big time wide receiver like a Godwin, something like that, I think that's a great combination. And the Colts are, probably potential favorites in that division again, and they're going to be making a playoff push.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, they already were a playoff team with Phillip
Exactly, yeah.
Rivers under center. Now they've arguably upgraded. You can say I definitely think Wentz is better than Rivers, but like I think almost anybody with his noodle arm last year is better than Rivers in general there. But no, I totally agree. I think the Colts are the big winners here. They kind of put themselves with a little bit of insurance policy with that deal as well. So I think it's going to be good for Wentz going to a system he knows, but I've got some opinions on Carson Wentz that people have not liked on Twitter that I'm going to bring up here as well with some stats to back it up here in a second. But no, I totally agree. I think it's there's something to remember about the offseason and about trades going down. Everything's a rumor till it's not. Because we've heard he's going to the Bears, this, that. And I'm like, and then you hear talking about Denver's like, we want any quarterback but Wentz and things like that. And you have to kind of sift through that as fantasy owners in the offseason to not overreact or underreact to some of these things. So it's something to kind of keep an eye on with, especially with like, hopefully the next time we talk that Deshaun Watson trade will be done or we'll have some clarity there. But we're talking about the Wentz deal. We kind of brought up a little bit on there. I want Avram to kind of expand on this as well. Wentz to the Colts. What does it mean for the Colts? As you kind of brought up a little bit, and what does it mean for fantasy there as well? Would you have him ranked in your top quarterbacks, Avram?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest deal here, like I said, going back to earlier, is for Wentz. When he was with the Eagles, if he hadn't moved, I would have had him, probably around that 15th quarterback mark, maybe even a little bit lower, depending on what they did in free agency and in the draft. But I've got him higher now by, not by a lot, but, maybe by 2 to 4 spots, something like that. Again, we have to see how free agency shakes up. I don't think it's a huge, change of things for guys like Jonathan Taylor, a sweetheart for a lot of people as a sophomore player heading into 2021. I think the biggest deal here is the fact that they brought in someone that can continue the trajectory of the players that we saw flash in 2020. So Taylor, Pittman, and, those tight ends too, even though there's so many of them there in Indianapolis. But we know that one of
bringing
them,
in more tight ends.
I've heard that rumor as well. I've heard that rumor as well. But to me, it's going to be a good situation for those guys. I'm excited that Jonathan Taylor and Pittman retain their value. So personally, that's what I'm excited about. The fact that Jonathan Taylor is still an RB1, because if it was someone other than Wentz, let's say like a Gardner Minshew or something like that, just throwing out a name, I wouldn't have been as excited about the prospects in Indy.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think Jonathan Taylor is, again, no matter who went there, it's almost a lateral move with a lot of things. But the fact they got someone that is a slight upgrade solidifies him as that round 1 pick versus any kind of like question marks you could have there with that. So I'm glad you brought that up. Tony, what are you thinking about this one? How does it affect Winston? Where do you have him in your top quarterbacks going into next year?
Yeah, I'm sort of about the same as Avram. I think his ceiling will be QB 10. I'd say what we'd probably expect. I could see him finishing QB 12, sort of in that range, like somewhere in the teens. I don't think he's going to blow up, go off, anything like that. But it's a good system. Like we've all said, it's a good O-line. They've got young budding stars on offense. The defense is good. It's like Mitch Trubisky, his rookie year. Like they had a great defense and they just needed a quarterback to put the ball in someone's hands. That's what I think Wentz is going to do. And so they secured, I would say, one of the better quarterbacks that's in the market, this off season here. But I like it, and hopefully they can fill in those other gaps. Like they do need a big name, like Avram was saying, with getting Godwin. One of my bolder takes is that maybe Allen Robinson will want to sign there now. And they have plenty of cap space. I think the Colts are up at second with 68 million right now available, and that's without cutting people or anything like that. I don't know if they need to pay people on defense because that'll obviously drop it, but I brought up this hypothetical to a buddy of mine. I was like, what if they got Allen Robinson and Hunter Henry and gave Allen Robinson 20 mil a year and Hunter Henry 10? I'm like, that'd be a really good offense, just with those two additions. And then they have that first rounder to add to it. They have a lot to get to that point. They have a lot to do, but I think the Colts are a smart organization. So it could be really interesting what they do going forward here into free agency and the draft.
Yeah, they totally have the avenue to build that team. That's one of the biggest things I do like about that situation. I will have to disagree on some of this with you. on Carson Wentz, and I'm gonna throw out all my stats I've had to bring up with Wentz.
Go for it.
I don't think I want you guys to respond to this one. You're allowed to disagree, of course, but I want to see what you guys think of this. So bringing up last year and how bad he was, and if you watch the tape, his mechanics shot down. Everyone wants to talk about the offensive line, and 100% he's going to a better offensive line system. But did you know that Carson Wentz had double the amount of interceptions in a clean pocket compared to under pressure? He threw 10 in a clean pocket, 5 under pressure. His completion rate in a more than 2.5 seconds, so when he's in a clean pocket and protected, went down to 49% last year. Not saying it can't improve back, but those are some stats that I think worry me about Carson Wentz, about like even bumping him up inside that top 15 was my biggest concern. So I have him around the 15 to 20 range. Now, more weapons getting brought there. He has room to grow. I think he's going to have quarterback 1 weeks, but I think in a 1 quarterback league, he's not going to be worth rostering most of the time, besides like an injury happening or someone going through, but he'll be drafted as if he is. And in a 2 quarterback league, I think he's in that same range of like the Goff Carr area more than he is the top end, like the Tannehill, personally, based on that. Again, weapons can change things. Of course, we've seen that happen to many quarterbacks, but that's where my head is at right now based on what we saw last year. And to kind of bring up another thing, this was the first year he brought rushing stats back in since his ACL injury, and he still was doing that poorly as a producer there. Now that I've done my word vomit, Avram, I want you to kind of retort and think about what do you think of what I just said there?
Yeah, I mean, look, definitely no matter how you slice it, Wentz had a bad season in 2020. I agree with that. And I know everyone keeps pointing to the offensive line in Indianapolis. And, you know, you brought up the stats why, you know, we should probably still be concerned. But that offensive line, I'm going to keep going back to it. I know it's, you know, just a broken record. I was listening to, I think it was like Undisputed or something when the news broke about this, and they were giving the stats about how many times Wentz was sacked this last season. I think it was like between 50 and 60 times versus the amount of sacks that the Colts gave up, where Indy gave up 19 sacks on the entire season, which that's a huge difference. And keep in mind that happened while Wentz didn't play an entire season because he got benched. So those numbers could have been even bigger. So the fact that he's going to get much better protection, I'm excited about that. And ultimately, you know, I think that the division he plays in is also good for fantasy purposes because you're going to be playing the Jaguars twice a year. You know, their defense isn't going to suddenly just make a turnaround. The Texans, they were one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And then the Tennessee Titans, kind of similar situation. Their defense was kind of that Achilles heel. I think the Titans maybe have the best chance to kind of turn it around quickly since, you know, they don't have too many holes offensively. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to be involved 6 times during the year in pretty high scoring affairs. So I am, you know, like Tony said, not going to call him a top 10 quarterback necessarily, but still slightly higher maybe on Wentz than you might be.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I brought it. You guys, neither one of you seem to be like to the moon like I've seen some people on, but I'm always like interested to hear that take, and I'm trying to like sift through the trade optimism a little bit. I mean, Frank Reich did get the most out of Wentz, so I can have some optimism, but like I have him at quarterback 15, like locked in, but he's definitely a tier behind that like 10 to 14 range to me. He's like the top of that next tier, personally. Tony, what's your opinion on what I had to say?
Yeah, I mean, you everything you're saying is right. Like stats are fair, and you can point them out. But you know, I could throw it right back in your face. The year before this past season, he had 4,000 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. Now, I'm just spitballing this right now. I don't know what the biggest difference was, whether the O-line was healthier in 2019 versus this past season. I know the O-line was banged up, but I can't speak for 2019. I won't disagree that quarterback 15, like that's very reasonable because if he does still have the interceptions issue, that's going to cause him to fall a little bit. But like Alvin was saying, the O-line is a big upgrade. And even though it was clean pocket versus not clean pocket, Wentz will get out of the pocket a lot quicker than Phillip Rivers did. I think everyone would agree with that one. So we'll see going into next season. But I'm still going to stick with like that QB 12 range. I think he figures things out. And again, like you mentioned, he's with Frank Reich, who literally brought the best out of him. They were together when they made that Super Bowl run. Granted, Wentz got hurt and did not play in the playoffs, but he led that team to the playoffs, who then ended up winning it. So that's my defense for Wentz. But again, quarterback 15 is not unreasonable because that's still like, if you're the 15th best quarterback in the NFL, you're middle of the pack. Like, you're not amazing and you don't suck. So a lot of teams don't have a quarterback that's quarterback 15.
More teams don't, actually.
Yeah, like they would beg for one. So even if he does like mediocre, I still think it's better than if they were to get Jameis Winston or Gardner Minshew, like Avram said earlier. So that's where I'm at with him.
No, I totally agree with that one. I mean, something to bring up, though, with that 4,000-yard season, he was the first quarterback ever to throw 4,000 yards without having a wide receiver have over about 500 yards. So that's kind of another crazy stat there. But he did only finish quarterback 13 in points per games that year. And to kind of counterpoint that as well, he was averaging about 17 points per game, just like 17 and a half or above, somewhere around there, which would have put him around quarterback 19 in last year's standards. So, again, I'm hedging a little bit more on the other side, but I totally get the points of it there. And I don't think he's going to be as bad as last year. I just can't put him up in the next tier yet until I see it, personally.
Right, absolutely.
That's where I was going with that. So, talking about the Colts, that's enough of that right now. Let's move over to the Eagles. This is huge for Hurts, huge there for that one. But there's been some whispers in the bushes about other quarterbacks being come in to compete with that. Do you think the Eagles give him the keys to the castle in this one, Tony? Or do you think there's going to be some other kind of quarterback stuff going on? And where would you have Hurts as of right now, and as long as there's not another one competing against him?
Yeah.
Going in there.
I like Hurts. I'm on the side of the equation where I don't give up on a rookie unless he looked like absolute dog shit. So, like, just with like Tua, like Rome wasn't built in a day. So Hurts, who looked better than Tua, mind you, like Hurts had a good span of games at the end of the season last year. I mean, 2 300-plus passing yard games, multiple touchdown games. He's clearly got the legs to run. I see him finishing in the teens as well because he has that. I hate to toot the same horn, but like he has that rushing upside to a quarterback, and like those rushing touchdowns in fantasy are pretty valuable for quarterbacks because you get that 6 points versus the 4. I think he might struggle at the start of the season, but I think when they kind of get all their new pieces together and get things going, he'll start putting the ball in the hands and scoring some touchdowns. But I would say somewhere around like QB 14 is where I'd put him right now. A lot of people are higher, but that's about where I have him right now.
So you would take Wentz over Hurts in a draft right now?
Depends if it's redraft or dynasty.
Okay.
If we're talking redraft, I would probably go Wentz, but in dynasty, I'd go Hurts just because he's younger and he's got plenty of years ahead of him, whereas Wentz is 28 and like who knows what's going to happen, and the Colts aren't necessarily going to build their future around Wentz potentially, so we'll see. But I would say QB 14 right now.
Gotcha. I was curious because you had Wentz around 12 and Hurts around 14.
Yeah.
That's all I was curious
I would put them. Well, look, if you look at the offenses, the Eagles are messed right now. Other than Miles Sanders and Hurts, they're messy. Like Rager didn't look amazing, and wasn't he the first wide receiver taken in the draft last year?
No, that was Ruggs. But he was definitely.
Oh, Ruggs. Okay, so he was one of the early
like Ruggs, Judy, still like taking over receivers.
Yeah, and there was few times where I'm watching Rager and I'm like, this guy's great. That's not what I said. Like, he's obviously talented, don't get me wrong, but when I watch CeeDee Lamb play, I'm like, holy shit, CeeDee Lamb's good. I never really said that about Rager. So they have a lot to figure out, and that's why I think Wentz is higher than Hurts in the fantasy rankings because of the pieces that are already there. Now, that's going to change free agency in the draft, but that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, no, I was just curious about that one because based on that's what we're kind of trying to figure out here is where these pieces should be in place there. And I don't think that's out of the question 14 for Hurts. I'll give my opinion in a second, but I want to hear from Avram real quick.
Yeah, definitely. So, I'll echo some of the similar sentiments. For me, I'd say that Hurts is a quarterback that has maybe a higher ceiling than Wentz just because of what he can do with his legs. But at the same time, he has a lower floor, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, he's a bit more of a boom or bust type of candidate. If you want some more, performances where it's kind of expected and it's a little bit safer, then you go with Carson Wentz. That's how I would look at it. Now, I don't buy into the whole theory that the Eagles are going to bring in another quarterback, or at least I hope they don't, because look, you got rid of Wentz. You invested heavily in Hurts last season. You don't want a unneeded quarterback controversy. Please don't spend that first-round pick. I think that's 6th overall on a quarterback. Upgrade, whether it's wide receiver, tight end, offensive line. Do one of those things and build that system around Hurts. I think that's the best thing that you could do. As far as whether I have him slightly above, below Carson Wentz, it's going to depend on probably the kind of roster that at the end of the day I'm looking to build. But just based on pure projections, I'll take a chance on Hurts because I kind of like those rushing upside type of quarterbacks, and that's going to give you potential numbers where, at least for fantasy purposes, it's doable. Now, might not necessarily translate into wins, something like that, but I probably have him right around quarterback number 11, 12, and then Wentz either at that 12, 13 range, a little bit lower 14 range. As far as whether I would draft him, I'd rather have him in Dynasty over Wentz. I agree with Tony on that. In redraft, honestly, I wouldn't want either one of those guys as my QB1, if I'm being totally honest. I'd feel pretty bad about that. But if I had to pick one, assuming that I got some pretty decent studs at the other positions, and then you just go high upside at the quarterback position, give me Hurts in that case.
Yeah, and I'm going to I love that you said that. That's one of the things I wanted to bring up here is Hurts has the bigger range of outcomes, like vastly different compared to who you talk to and what he is capable of. Because I've heard people say he's as high as QB6 and as low as QB19. I think he could fall anywhere in between there is the biggest thing. I have in my rankings, and I have different rankings for him based on Superflex and based on one QB leagues. My Superflex ranking of him is around QB14. My one QB ranking is QB10. Now, as weird as that sounds, I have them in separate spots because in a one quarterback league, I want that win you a week player. And that's where I would draft him about is that 10 spot, probably after that, Rodgers Tannehill area there in a redraft league. But in a 2 quarterback league or a super flex league, I want that stability as my second quarterback. So that's why I have him a little bit lower on that one. I do have him one spot ahead of Wentz in super flex there, just because I think the upside there is a little bit better. But by all means, I don't think they're going to get someone to compete directly against him. If I had to put money on, I think it's going to end up being Tyrod Taylor, Jacoby Brissett, being put there as a backup to help him grow because they have similar skills to Hurts and can kind of teach him kind of the ropes of the NFL a little bit more. Those are 2 guys that are out in free agency right now that can be picked up and could start, and then they wouldn't have to change the offense too much if Hurts gets hurt specifically. So I think that's kind of where I think they will go and should go there. I'm glad you brought up Rager a little bit there. I'll get to you in 1 second, Tony. But because I was big on Rager last year and he did not perform up to snuff, and I don't think that Hurts helps him in that situation just because I think he's going to get more points by rushing than anything else. I think he's going to be one of those quarterbacks that kind of like a Taysom Hill, but actually good there. That gets most of his by the rushing yards. But Tony, you had something to say, bud? What you got?
Yeah, if I didn't address the whole draft pick situation when I was talking, if they don't take a wide receiver at that 6th spot, I think they're silly. Only because I think there's really, really talented wide receivers in this draft. And that's one of the big things missing from their offense other than their line. You need linemen, but linemen can be great picks in the 5th round. That's the thing about linemen. They just take good drafting, good scouting to find linemen. But if you can get a Jamar Chase on your offense, why wouldn't you want that? That seems like when wide receiver is a pressing need. Obviously their defense sucks, so they might have to address the defense too. But if you could get some kind of guy like Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith, wherever you're ranking these guys, that just seems like a no-brainer to me. But I don't work in the NFL, so what do I know?
Yeah, I mean that's the talk about. There's so many wide receivers in this class. You could also debate that they can get a good one in the second round,
True.
and maybe go O-line in the first round. Like these guys like Bateman could be somewhere in the second round. A deeper one is like Tamarian Terry, who probably might not even be drafted based on his off the field issues. That could be a one in the NFL. But like I see where her head's at. They definitely they need to have. They're not rolling out J-Jaw and Rager and getting what they need out of their wide receiver crew. I totally agree.
I've seen J-Jaw mentioned so much on Twitter. I'm like, did he touch the field this year? Why are people still talking about him?
I mean, he existed. He didn't touch the football very much because he can't catch well. But that's another story. Aubrey, it looks like you have something to say, bud.
Yeah, I'll say this real quick. I do agree with you guys. You got to go wide receiver. It makes kind of the most sense, but don't be shocked if the Eagles kind of maybe go defensive back with that pick, someone like a Farley, someone like a Surtain, or maybe even linebacker like a Parsons. That wouldn't shock me at all. I hope they go wide receiver, and it still kills me that, I believe they went Rieger when someone like a Justin Jefferson was available last year, because Rieger went a couple picks before Jefferson, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they did.
And so like the last thing I'll say about Hurts, like if you're in a league where you get different types of passing bonuses, things like that, then I'll take Wentz over Hurts in that situation. Because, whatever wide receivers they have there, I still haven't seen what I'd like to from Hurts as a pure pocket passer.
Yeah.
He had a couple of good games. I'd argue one good game when he was starting versus the Cardinals, where it was that big shootout. But otherwise, I wasn't really all that impressed with him as a passer. From a fantasy purpose, though, again, at what he can do as a rusher of the football, that's where the intrigue comes in. If you take that away, then, he plummets. So,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's totally not a great passer. He had under 57% completion percentage in those games. His best game was like 56%, which is like abysmal in NFL standards there. But again, the scoring system's like almost debatably broken in most like standard leagues when it comes to the quarterback position. That 1 point for every 10 yards versus the 1 point rushing 10 yards, and then 1 point for every 25 passing yards. It's just a completely imbalanced situation, but that's the way the scoring is right now. In most leagues there. No, I love this talk, but we got to move on to our next part, which is what the big show is about, our bounce back players for the 2021 season. Going into it, players that could have underperformed due to injury, due to lack of performance, just the situation they were in, or things like that. So we're each got about 3 players to kind of touch on. We'll spend a couple minutes on each one. We're going to do this one round robin style, one player at a time. And Tony, you're lucky number 1. Who is your bounce back player, your first one for this year?
So this guy's been getting a lot of hate on Twitter, and I get it, but I also don't. Joe Mixon, Cincinnati Bengals running back. He had a bad year. I mean, he was injured for most of it. He had a few games where he just absolutely went off, and then he had some games where it looked like he was like a third string running back. But if you ask me, Joe Mixon's going to do just fine, because if the Bengals are smart, they're going to build an offensive line. They're going to protect not only Burrow, but also create space and open lanes for Joe Mixon. I mean, if we're looking at Joe Mixon's stats, in 2018 and 2019, he had back-to-back 1,400 scrimmage yards in each of those seasons, over 1,000 rushing for both of them. I mean, I asked some of my Bengal friends, I said, well, how was the line there? And they were like, well, one season they were about average and one season they were below average. And I'm like, okay, if Joe Mixon can get 1,400 scrimmage yards with nothing above average line, if they can build a decent O-line there, imagine what he could do with that good line. It blows my mind when people rip on him. And I know he isn't necessarily the greatest human, but we're talking football. That's all we're talking. I mean, he gets plenty of passing game work.
Finally. Took him long enough to get that passing game work.
Yeah, and he's got Joe Burrow as his quarterback, who is, his stats show that he uses the running back in the passing game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 55 receptions in their senior year together, or whatever, their last year together.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets workhorse level amount of touches. I mean, we'll see. He's only 24. I really like his value because in these startups, you can get him in 5th and 6th rounds. And even some crazier ones, I've seen him in the 7th. So I like Mixon coming back this next year. I mean, I hope the Bengals focus on their O-line, because I think that's about the only thing missing from their offense for the most part. I know they don't have a tight end, but Drew Sample and CJ Uzomah kind of fill in when they need to. But hopefully Mixon bounces back here next season.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think a big thing with Mixon is that people don't realize how good he was when he played. The downside that everyone's like burnt out when he has not played, because I believe he looking at points per game on in PPR was 16.6, which is good enough to be running back 11 inside that the games he did play. The downside is he only played 6 games last year, so and I think he burnt everyone so bad of he wasn't put on IR, so you held him like he was coming back. And last year's like, yeah, you see, IR season was like, oh, you can put him on there for a couple weeks and pull him off. Nope. Foot still hurt. So I'll call him Footless Joe Mixon on that one. But
I think he was doing a similar AJ Green thing. Like he was holding out because there was no reason to come back. There's got to be.
Maybe. They need to invest in an O-line around them just to keep Burrow upright. All those injuries to their star players is not acceptable. I think it's going to be something that, like, I don't want to see another Andrew Luck situation where we see a great quarterback in their prime retire early because they've taken too many hits and taken too many injuries. But that's a story for another day. Avram, what's your opinion on Mixon?
Yeah, so no, look, I definitely agree. Mixon right now is a good value. He's still, the way that I look at it, recency bias is going to have him kind of plummeting down people's draft boards. Now, similar situation for the Bengals, I would say kind of like the Eagles. With their first round pick, for the love of God, the only possible selection should be offensive lineman. Don't get cute. Don't add Kyle Pitts. Don't add a wide receiver to replace AJ Green. You've still got good weapons there. It has to be an offensive lineman for the sake of Joe Burrow, for the sake of that team, for the sake of Mixon, for everybody's sake. Now, I think for Mixon, a lot of it will be tied to how quickly Joe Burrow comes back. I've read that he's on track to be ready there for week 1, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I like Mixon. I think he still has room to grow as a pass catcher. I think the skill set is there, but the Bengals just haven't quite unleashed him. That's why, as crazy as it sounds, when he went down, I was kind of, this last season saying, I think Giovanni Bernard for the Bengals is kind of a better all-around back, just because the way they use him as a pass catcher. I know he's a little bit smaller and things like that, but he could still produce as a rusher before, when that offense had a capable quarterback. We've seen it before, because this isn't like the first time Joe Mixon's gotten hurt. Granted, it was for an extended period of time, but he's missed like a game or two, like I think, for the last 2 seasons in a row. And Giovanni Bernard has filled in great, especially for PPR scoring. But no, at the end of the day, obviously Mixon has the higher ceiling. Maybe just handcuff him with Giovanni Bernard for whatever that's worth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's had Mixon in the past few years should have been handcuffing Gio for a while now, especially when he was getting more of the passer. But I think, he needs to be unleashed. He needs to stay healthy, and he definitely returned value, especially now. He's not even getting drafted inside the top 12, and I think he's got about top 8 upside when he's on the field. The thing is, like, is he going to be on the field there? But Avram, I hear you have another running back that's going to bounce back here in 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. My guy, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, maybe the poster child of disappointing rookie running backs. And, look, hand up, I was someone that after the Damien Williams news broke that he's going to opt out of the season due to COVID, I'm like, oh, okay, now I'll actually bite on the CEH hype. Because before that, I was like, not so much. But afterwards, I was all in. Him as a first rounder last year didn't exactly pan out. Well, at least not, after the Le'Veon Bell edition, because before Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if you look at his attempts per game, it was 17.8 prior to Le'Veon Bell coming in. Afterwards, that goes down to 10.5. That's a huge, drop. And it makes sense as far as why he wasn't producing as much. The volume wasn't there. But I think we all saw that Le'Veon Bell isn't the answer. As much as I'd like to see him kind of have a rebirth, I think he's probably done, or maybe just has to go to a perfect situation. So I think he's gone, which means it's going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire with Damien Williams again. But I'll pose, this scenario where it's a situation with the running back position. It's the most replaceable position in the NFL, bar none. And if I'm looking at a situation where cap hit wise, everyone's salary cap is going to be kind of diminished this year because of COVID, things like that. And Damien Williams' numbers, not awful. He's got about a 2.8 million cap hit with his last contract, but in terms of dead money, just $500K. So if they need to make some tough decisions and he's potentially cut, man, I think that really opens the door for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, obviously, a better picture of that will come around once we get into free agency. But I still see him as the top running back in that backfield. I think he was arguably kind of the best player for the Chiefs other than Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. He kind of got you those big plays. I know he's a versatile guy. They use him as a pass catcher. So he still presents all that upside. And I think similar to someone like a Joe Mixon, recency bias, people are going to be kind of fading him because, he was obviously a first-round pick most of the times this last year, but he finished as the running back 18 on the year, as the fourth rookie running back behind James Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, and Antonio Gibson. So definitely there's going to be a lot of people that were burnt and kind of fading him, but I'd say not so quick. I think he's in a great position, still on a great offense that's going to be high scoring, and there's going to be a lot of upside there.
No, it's something I agree with. I love Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a value right now and as a bounce back because in retrospect, if you look at his numbers, his season wasn't bad. He just didn't reach the ceiling that we saw that we wanted from him because we wanted him to be, let's be honest, Kareem Hunt. His rookie season. We wanted that guy, and we saw the writing on the wall with everything going in. He still had exactly 1,100 yards from scrimmage. That's great for a rookie. 803 in the rushing game, 297 in the receiving game. Great. He did that running back 18 in 13 games as well. Also counting into that, one game he was active but got 0 carries in that game. So really it's 12 games in that. So these are all things to consider with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I love his value right now. I mean, in a startup I just did, I got him in the just 4.9 in a 12-team startup. I traded the rookie 1.05 for him straight up, and another one. So his value is down, but he might not ever reach the ceiling we saw of him, but he's definitely better than his finish shows, especially on offense. I'm not too worried about Damien Williams. I don't think he's going to be cut, but I think his age and his presence, the only place I think where Damien Williams might outshine him is in the goal line work, because that's where Clyde Edwards really struggled. He only got 3 touchdowns inside the goal line area on about 24 attempts. So it's not great percentage there, but I think it's a great call right there. Tony, what's your opinion on CEH?
Yeah, I mean, he was set up for failure, not failure, but like the amount of hype and expectations that he went into as a rookie on the reigning Super Bowl champions in his rookie year. It's just like, it was so unfair for him. And like, yeah, he was a first round running back, but again, he's going to get better. He'll improve. He'll learn. He'll adjust. You said he had 1,100 scrimmage yards with 800 rushing. I can see him getting 1,000 rushing yards next year, improving that pass work. Goal line, like you were mentioning, goal line work needs to be, edged up, needs to improve. But we'll see. I wasn't a big CEH guy just because of the hype. I was like, I don't want to draft this running back and have him be a total bust. And he wasn't a bust, but he certainly did not reach those expectations, because in like redraft leagues, he was going as high as like 104, 105. Like,
the amount of redraft leagues I saw last year where I got Kamara at like 7 and he went at like 6. So like I had so much Kamara because everyone took CH. CH was kind of put at his ceiling. His absolute ceiling, he was like being drafted at. Yeah. And anybody's going to feel like a disappointment at that level. But Tony, I'll let you continue, bud.
No, yeah, you're right. And so I was just like, I would rather take a guy like Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henry than some rookie who has these unbearable expectations from the fantasy community or just everyone in general. And I was just like, I'm going to get a guy who's established for redraft. In Dynasty, it made sense to draft him because he was going to be on the best offense in the league, if not one of the best offenses. So I think things will, I think his value will go up as the years go on, but he's still going to have a lot of pressure being on that offense regardless.
Yeah, so in terms of dynasty, you kind of brought that up. I think he's definitely a buy now as well because he was a first-round draft capital, which means they have that fifth-year option, which is so important for running backs. They're not going to pay a running back until his contract's up. So that's something to keep in mind as well for running backs drafted in the first round is they get the option for a team for a dynasty perspective. I'm going to move this along to my first player and my bounce back player. I think a good bounce back is kind of lower level than what you guys went with, but Smokey John Brown, one of my favorite receivers in the NFL, has kind of had trouble bouncing from team to team with that sickle cell issue, but injuries were the big thing this past year, but he is coming off in 2019 a over 1,000 yard season. We saw the improvement in Josh Allen, and when Brown was on the field, he made Josh Allen better. Yes, I understand he can be a cap casualty this year, but I don't think he's going to be one they cut. I think they'd be more leaning toward Beasley because Brown just works in that offense better, and he's a better route runner that if they don't need to, they won't, in my opinion. But I'm going to go reverse order on this one. Avram, what do you think of John Brown?
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with John Brown. He only played 8 games this last season. So, and there were some where he was kind of, iffy, wasn't all that involved. It was kind of a situation where 1 week he played, but then the next he was absent. So it was clear to see that it was kind of a nagging injury for him all season long. But when he did actually play and when he saw targets, he was producing. And I actually thought, assuming 100% health, which is obviously tough to do anytime, but that's how you have to approach any season for players when looking at their projections. I thought him and Stephon Diggs would finish with similar type of numbers because, Josh Allen was kind of a little bit more familiar with John Brown. Obviously, didn't exactly pan out that way. Stephon Diggs just absolutely made me look like a fool.
You weren't the only one, though. A lot of people were down on Diggs this past year.
Yeah.
It's been like the consensus in the community there. But
I hope John Brown stays with the Bills because we saw, Josh Allen take that next big step. It's a good offense, but I think honestly, wherever he goes, if he is a cap casualty, he's a nice wide receiver too. If it's outside of Buffalo, it's going to depend on the situation he winds up in. But if it's in Buffalo, he stays there. I love it because, they're one of the favorites in the AFC, them, the Chiefs. You can throw in a couple other teams there as well as for contention. But for that reason, they probably want to retain some of those big playmakers. And I think Brown falls in that category. So I'm definitely excited for him. Yeah.
Yeah. Tony, what's your opinion of JB?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot of his stats, but I know he's always been relevant no matter what team he's on. And he's got those lingering injuries, blah, blah, blah. But, as we're talking about this, let's say he were to leave, imagine him on the Packers. How do you think that would work out?
The downside is I don't believe he could, but go on. Just sickle cell trait. The sickle cell trait might not let him go to that atmosphere and be able to play a full
that's true.
season there. But I love where your head's at.
If he's in Buffalo, is it that much colder?
It's elevation. It's elevation levels is the key factor of that one. That's why he didn't play well in Arizona. But I definitely could see the Packers being an option. So I want to hear what you have to say of that, as long as they can manage that.
No, yeah. He's like Avram said, he's a great wide receiver too. He doesn't have that wide receiver 1 in him, but he's also not like some scrappy wide receiver 3. He's a good player. He knows what he's doing. He can catch the ball. He can run the deep route. He's reliable. He's just got reliable in terms of talent, but he's got those lingering health issues. But again, if he's healthy, I like him. And so my Gabriel Davis shares say, I wish he's not on the Bills this next year. But regardless of where he's playing, he's going to produce.
Yeah, Gabriel Davis is a great name to bring up especially for dynasty players. He's on the uprise 100%. Yeah. Someone that had a great deep ball percentage out there. So when we get to the breakout shows, that might be someone we want to talk about there. So be tuned to that one soon, guys. We have a breakout show come up in a few weeks. But speaking of this one, let's move on to our next guy here. Tony, I want to go back to you. Who's your second bounce back guy?
Yeah, so I'm going down south to the state where everything's bigger. Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup was the non-benefactor of the Cowboys drafting CeeDee Lamb in the first round. Because if CeeDee Lamb wasn't there, I think Gallup would have had an amazing year 3. We saw year 2. He went from 500 yards his rookie season and then jumped to 1,100 year 2. Like, he was ready for a year 3 breakout. Psych, we're going to draft CeeDee Lamb. I feel bad for Gallup because no matter what quarterback played for the Cowboys, he did pretty well. And, he's only 24 years old. And like I said, he got overshadowed. I think he's a free agent, I'm pretty sure. So personally, if I was Gallup, I'd be like deuces. So I'd go somewhere where I'm wanted. He had 840 yards and 5 touchdowns this past year as a wide receiver 3, essentially. Like, that's really good numbers for like essentially the 4th option in that offense. And I know Dak's a gunslinger and they were always losing, so all they had to do is throw the ball. But when you're still getting attention as the 4th option, like, you're clearly talented. So for Gallup, I'm hoping he goes somewhere new where he can kind of be one of the at least top 3 options, hopefully the second, if not first, but usually the running backs are the first option. But I brought a few teams up. I wrote a few teams down just to see what you guys think. I'll mention what I think for each of these teams, but I'm curious. So I wrote down the Chiefs as an option for him. I know it's not the best for fantasy purposes because you got Tyreek, Kelsey, and CEH. So it'd kind of be like a similar stage with the Cowboys. But I think he's better than Hardman and Demarcus Robinson and Pringle, whoever that guy's name is. Then I also wrote down the Colts because I think he could be a cheaper option to sign for them to sign so that they could focus on other pieces. I think that'd be good fantasy value as well as real life value being on the Colts. And then I also mentioned Green Bay, which, I mean, anytime a wide receiver is mentioned, Green Bay can be tossed in there. But I think Green Bay would be great fantasy value versus the other 2 teams. But again, I think Michael Gallup, if he leaves, this is under the assumption he leaves, I think he'll have a great bounce back year if he can get in a spot where he's featured more often.
Yeah, the biggest thing about that is he is actually on his last year of his rookie deal.
Okay.
But he's definitely been on the trade radar. So I'm glad you brought up like where he could land and teams that might be interested there. So that might be something to go with that. And I do love those landing spots for Gallup there. One of the biggest thing with that. Gallup is an anomaly of a player because he had one of the most biggest target shares with 105 targets. But his production did not equate that really at all. He was only 1 target less than a guy like A.J. Brown, if you want to compare it that way for the season. So that's something to consider with all that going in. I think he's a great receiver. Remember the conversations going into 2020, like, oh, he's just Amari Cooper, the same exact thing, which as an Amari Cooper truther, I had to argue to the end of days with that. But the answer to the whole thing with Dak going down, that none of them were really that productive. And we've seen CeeDee Lamb ascend as well. But he's a great option. I think they are trying to shop him a little bit so he could end up in a better spot. And I think he's got the ability to be like a high-end wide receiver too in another offense greatly there. Avra, I'm going to send it your way. I want you to bring up your opinions of Gallup. And I think you have another Cowboy to talk about. So I want to hear that as well. So kind of piece all of Dallas together.
100%. Yeah. A little bit of foreshadowing. So I think with Gallup, I'm going to keep it brief. The way you should treat him, remember before the Cowboys drafted CeeDee Lamb, remember how excited you were about the potential of Michael Gallup? Get those feelings back. If he winds up in a new home, absolutely, he can return on that value. It's a tough situation right now. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Dallas. If he stays there, probably low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. It'll depend on CeeDee Lamb and how much they value him. But, all things considered, where they drafted him last year and all the talent they had at that position already probably tells you all you need to know about that. But as long as Dak is there, I'm buying a lot of these Dallas Cowboy candidates. And, kind of going to my next pick, transitioning, I'm looking at Ezekiel Elliott, another running back, another guy that you drafted probably for redraft purposes with the first, 1, 2, 3 picks, and a top 3, top 4 selection, as low as it gets. And then, for the first couple of weeks before Dak Prescott's injury, Zeke was doing all right. This is in standard scoring leagues, 25 points, 16 points, 11 points, 12 points, 22 points. Those are good numbers, especially in pure standard scoring. Afterwards, after that injury to Dak Prescott, that entire team, that entire offense just kind of went downhill. He only had 3 games afterwards of 10-plus points. So, again, that tells you all you need to know. This offense, this team is completely different with Dak Prescott under center. It also probably, doesn't help that once Dak went down, it was kind of a quarterback carousel, Andy Dalton getting hurt. So it was a lot of just inconsistencies offensively. Now, a lot of people might bring up the offensive line, and I agree. A former strong suit of that team is kind of all of a sudden going downwards. So I'm hoping the Cowboys invest in that during free agency or during the draft. And, if they do that, I think Zeke can return to being a high-end RB1. And right now, if he's outside of the top 4, top 5 picks for redraft purposes, I'm buying those Zeke shares, assuming that Dak is still there. That's what this whole thing is contingent on. If Dak's there, you buy every one of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, that's kind of the case right there. Dak is arguably a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. It's hard to go in there, maybe like on the lower end, but I think he's definitely, in my opinion, a top 5 quarterback there, especially for fantasy purposes, and he elevates everyone around him there. Zeke has every opportunity to bounce back. The worry is he is running up on those carries kind of thing, but I don't think he's as low as everyone thinks he is right now. And the whole offense had a Ben DiNucci problem. That's what I call it there. We're bringing everything down. So, yeah, I definitely think Dallas is on the up and up with Dak coming back there. I do think I would be a little more cautious with Zeke. I still think it's a first round redraft pick when it's all said and done, but maybe more of the tail end of the first round than anything else. What do you think about that one there, Tony?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with Avram. I actually wrote an article about bounce back candidates this week. So this episode kind of coincided with my article, but Zeke was in my article, and I was just talking about how basically what Avram said. He needs Dak there, or at least a good quarterback, and he needs his offensive line to be consistent because that offensive line was kind of a mess last season. So if they can get those things figured out, Zeke's can be just fine. Like, it's crazy to think of him as a bounce back when he finished running back 9, but like he was drafted, at least in redrafts, he was drafted like the 3rd pick. I had a work league, guy took him 2nd over Saquon and benefited because of that, only because Saquon was out for the year.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think Zeke bounces back. Hopefully Dallas gets smart and pays Dak before it's too late, and they can get the line figured out and get things going, because that's a nasty offense when everything's fluid and going.
Oh, 100%. So I'm going to move on into my next guy on this one. It is one of my favorite players. Being a Saints fan, it is Michael Thomas there. Drafted as the wide receiver 1 coming out into 2020, like clear and above and beyond, which shows. And then he did not live up to any expectation whatsoever. Whether you want to blame it on injury, blame it on Drew Brees falling off a cliff a little bit, and injury of his own. That's something which would be debatable, but something I like to bring up, and I'm going to bring this back to the pregame HQ. I've got an article on there called the Taysom Hill experiment. I wrote in the middle of the season to bring up, you extrapolate Taysom Hills, who right now is the only quarterback on the Saints roster besides the aforementioned Brees, who's probably retiring at this point. If you extrapolate those out, Michael Thomas would have had 163 targets, 1326 receiving yards if they played a full season at the pace in those games that Taysom Hill started. Those are great numbers. Those are wide receiver 1 numbers there. So the ceiling is still there. That's basically on the amount of targets he was getting with Taysom Hill. And again, debating with that one as well, you can go with if say Jameis Winston goes there, a better quarterback's there. And he's still the wide receiver 1 on the offense. So I think Michael Thomas will be probably a top 10, maybe with a top 3 wide receiver finish possibility in there for the 2021 season. So definitely a huge bounce back. And you're getting him around like the 4th round right now. I know I just got him in a mock at the 4th round, 4.4, I believe, in a 12-team league. So I think I love that value right there. Tony, what do you think of MT?
It's nuts that he's being drafted in the 4th round, personally. He had one bad season with lingering issues and an older quarterback, and I'm pretty sure he flourished with Taysom. So even if Taysom's his quarterback, he was being drafted in redrafts in the 1st round last year. I don't see why he's a 4th rounder in startups, but whatever, man. To each their own. I think Mike Thomas will be just fine. He's an elite wide receiver. He might be a little bit of a bitch boy, but whatever. As long as you play football and put up points, catch the ball, do your job.
Tony's feisty with that beer this Friday. I love it. I love it. No, I mean, the thing about that is like talking about target share. I mean, again, bring it back to this article if you want to check it out. He was 37% of the team's targets. That's elite numbers. 41% of the receiving yards. Like, what more do you want from a guy on that during that span with Taysom Hill? That's if Taysom Hill's the quarterback. Again, I'm biased 100%. I'm getting fired up on my boy here, but Avram, I want to hear from you real fast.
Yeah, as far as wide receivers, I think he has to be the poster child for bounce back guys. In you guys touched on Dynasty in redraft. I wouldn't be shocked for him to be a second round selection, which is an absolute travesty. He's still the main target for whoever, the quarterback is for the New Orleans Saints. And it's not even close. He's going to, in PPR, full PPR scoring, he's a cheat code. He has as high of a floor as you could want. And, all he has to do is stay healthy. Sean Payton, the guy's an offensive genius. I think he can figure it out, whoever the quarterback is, even with the shortcomings that Hill has, maybe as a passer. He was still able to produce good value for Michael Thomas. So I'm all aboard the Michael Thomas train.
Love it. Love it. So we're running out of time a little bit. So we're going to lightning round this last one through. So I want you to bring up your third player and about 2 to 3 quick points. And we're just not going to comment on it. We're going to just blast it through to finish this strong. So Tony, who's your third bounce back player and why?
Yeah, it's Noah Fant because the guy's incredibly talented. He has a 4.51 40-yard dash as a tight end. That's incredibly fast. I don't care what you say. Look, he's really talented. He had 500-plus receiving yards as a rookie, just got over 600 with a mess of quarterbacks this past season. If Denver is smart, they get a quarterback and get the ball in their offense, the skill players on that offense's hands. Like I said, he's a good route runner. He's scary in open field because he's huge and fast. If they get a quarterback, Noah Fant has a chance to be for sure top 5 tight end in fantasy. I won't say top 3. I feel like that's a little too bold. But again, this is all into the assumption that they get a quarterback because that guy is freaking good. I don't care what you say.
Love it. Avram, who's your third guy that's going to bounce back in 2021?
Absolutely. My guy is Julio Jones of the Falcons, and I know he's probably lost some shine here with what Calvin Ridley has done, and that's completely fair. But let's not forget that last year he missed 6 games, and it was 2 where he kind of partially played. He got re-injured, re-aggravated. But in the games when he was healthy, he averaged 11 targets and 100-plus yards receiving. So he hasn't lost a step. He plays in the NFC South, which I've been saying this for I don't know how many years in a row. That is a gold mine for fantasy purposes and fantasy scoring. And especially, with potentially the Panthers getting an upgrade at the quarterback position. Regardless, though, those are high-scoring games in that division. And unless Matt Ryan gets traded, that's the only way where I'll kind of back off this. But I still think that Matt Ryan is going to be the quarterback for the Falcons this season. And even if they bring in someone like a Justin Fields, Matt Ryan is still starting. This is still an offense that has to score a lot of points because of defensive deficiencies. So I'm all in on Julio Jones, and he's going to be a guy that I think, similar to Michael Thomas, can be in for a great bounce back.
Love it. Both those guys can be great values for your 2020 season. My last guy is DJ Chark, someone we all expected to ascend this year, but we also agreed that we thought Minshew was getting better than he was. It's really hard to be a really good wide receiver when the ball is not catchable. And DJ Chark only had about a 70% catchable pass rate. So 30% of his targets were not catchable, and he was also one of the deepest target passers in the NFL with a 5th overall based on Pro Football player profiler stats there, 29 deep targets compared to most players there. So something big there is we're getting a much better quarterback upgrade. Like they're already talking like they're drafting Trevor Lawrence. They're drafting Trevor Lawrence. He is a much better quarterback there. So I assume that the catchable rate's going to go up. So that means he's going to catch the ball more and he's going to get more fantasy points. Funny how that works there. No, it's been a great day. Love everything we had to say. So to kind of run down our bounce back players we got coming into next year. So we have CEH, Zeke, Julio. That's coming from my boy Autumn down there. Then we have Mixon, Gallup, and Fant coming from Tony. And myself, Smokey, John Brown, Michael Thomas, and DJ Chark. So those guys should be looking forward to get us a value to bounce back next year. But gentlemen, it's always a pleasure. It's been great talking to you guys. Where can we find your work, Tony?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at @itsjustfantasy_. I'm just grinding every day, trying to get some content out during the off season. It's a lot different.
Love it, man. Avram, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely, man. First and foremost, thanks for having me. It was a blast. Always is with you gentlemen. And as far as where you can find my work, on YouTube, All Day Pigskin, I'm in full NFL mock draft mode right now. So you'll see a bunch of videos for those breakdowns. Also, Pregame HQ, going to have some articles related to that coming out. And then on Twitter at All Day Pigskin, check me out there. That's a bit.
Love it, guys. You definitely give those guys a follow. Check them out. Also follow the Pregame HQ _. I'm CJ Kraus. You can find me here every week. You can also find me on Twitter at KidFlashFF there. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to roll it out here. Thank you guys, and we'll talk to you soon.